Today we're going to go over Kalb Chapter 1 and Mueller Chapter 5, and then I'll talk about the assignment for this week. So let's get started. So first of all, what is Python? Well, it's a general purpose programming language. There are many different IDEs to write code in Python. If you were to install Python by itself from the installer online, it comes with an IDE called idle, and on the left screenshot you will see a view from idle in macOS. So you get the standard prompt with the 3 greater than symbols, and this tells you that Python's ready to go and you can start writing code. Now what we are using, if you've already installed Anaconda, great. If you haven't, make sure you do that, as we're going to progress relatively quickly from now on, and I expect all of you to use Spyder. So on the right side of the screen, you'll see a screenshot from Spyder in macOS, which should look very similar to the PC version. I'm only showing the bottom right quadrant of the Python or the Spyder interface, where you have a console tab, and you see that Python 3.6.1 is running. It's an Anaconda custom version, and the terminal is running in IPython, an enhanced interactive Python. Now you can just type in question mark as it shows, and it'll give you an introduction and overview of IPython's features. Quick ref gives you quick reference. Help gives you Python's own help system. It's built into the language. An object question mark details about an object. I would recommend that you enter a question mark into the terminal, the IPython console, just to see what comes up, read through it, become familiar with IPython. Now, Python's a general programming language. What's really unique about Python is that it uses blocks, and it's a block structuring language. And what I mean by using blocks is that Python uses indentation to distinguish blocks of code. A block is basically a group of statements in a script. Now, a lot of languages use curly brackets. So if you've written in JavaScript or PHP, you're very familiar with curly brackets to distinguish chunks of code. Well, Python doesn't use curly brackets. It uses blocks. So if you've never had any experience with any other programming languages, great. Just know that Python is unique in that it uses indentation to distinguish blocks of code, where other languages might use other characters, such as curly braces. When you're looking at Python code, the statements within a block will line up vertically. So you see the example at the bottom of the screen. Block 1, and then block 2 is indented 4 spaces, and then block 3 is an indented 8 spaces. Now block 2 continues, and it's only indented 4 spaces, so vertically they line up. The same with block 1. Now that block 2 is done, we come back to block 1, and that has no indentation. So you can see that vertically, the code blocks are chunked using indentation. This is important. As I mentioned in the guidelines to writing Python, indentation should be 4 spaces. That's the default in Spyder. You'll see when you're writing code, when we move further along in the semester, when we start doing conditional logic, that the indentation will happen automatically, which is nice for us. Now, as I just mentioned, the style guide for Python code, again, go to the link on the screen, read through the documentation, just make sure you understand what's expected of you. I will specifically be ensuring that the indentations line up, that you don't go over 79 characters in line length. Both of these things, if you're using Spyder, are default, so you won't have to worry about that. Another aspect that I will be looking at, and remember this for the assignment today, line break before the binary operator. So as I mentioned on the left, you see income equals parentheses gross wages, which is what we call a variable, which I'll introduce in a couple of slides, plus taxable interest, plus etc., etc., etc. But you note that gross wages, and then you hit enter. Then you add the binary operator and the next variable. Enter. Binary operator, and in this instance, you have parentheses and two variables, but you're not breaking the line here, so it's okay. After that parentheses, you enter, and then you have the next binary operator, the same thing. On the right side, you'll see that we're breaking the line after the binary operator. Now, why is this a big deal, you ask? Well, it's much easier to read the code on the left than it is on the right. And when you're inheriting code or using someone else's code in your team, when you work in groups, you be sharing code, it's much easier to read the code that someone else has written when it's as you expect it. And we are going to expect in this class that the line break comes before a binary operator. Quotes in white space. Quotes. Single quoted strings and double quoted strings are treated the same in Python. Whatever you do, be consistent. I'm going to say this every week. Be consistent in what you do. Follow the rules, but be consistent if you're going to deviate from them in any way, and make sure you comment in the code why that deviation occurs. Now for the quotes, there is an exception. So if the string contains a single quote, then use double quotes to surround it. If the string contains double quotes, use single quotes to surround it. Why do we do this? So we don't have to use the backslash to tell Python that, hey, that single quote that I'm getting ready to put inside my other single quotes doesn't signify to you, programming language, that we're ending the quote here. So you'll see on the screen 3 boxes. On the left, in the green, TimTalk equals, which TimTalk is assigned the value of the string you're driving to the movies. I say you're because we have a single quote. So what do? We enclose this whole string of characters in double quotes. Now, in the box in the white, you have TimTalk is assigned you're driving to the movies. Again, the same thing, but note that backslash. That's telling Python to ignore that single quote. Don't treat it as the end of the string. It's just an ugly way to do it. It's fine, it's valid. You can write it like this, but it's an ugly way. If you take the time to put it in double quotes, then you don't have to use the backslash because Python's looking for the second double quote in the string to end what's being assigned to TimTalk, and everything's happy. Now in the red, you see you'll receive an error if you try to do this. TimTalk equals single quote you apostrophe RE driving to the movies, single quote. The apostrophe RE, we have to write it as a single quote, so Python will think that the string that you want to assign to TimTalk is just YOU. And then it doesn't have any idea what to do with the characters coming after. So you will get an error. So make sure that if your string contains a single quote, to enclose it in double quotes. If it includes double quotes inside the string, enclose the whole thing in single quotes. White space. Avoid extraneous white space. Avoid trailing white space. Always surround the binary operator with a single space on either side. Yes, spam ham 1 eggs 2. No, spam space ham space 1 space eggs space 2 space and then a space parentheses. We don't need those extra spaces. Comments. Don't let your comments contradict your code. If you change your code to fix an error or just to change the functionality, make sure you change your comments at the same time. Otherwise, you'll forget about it, and someone will come around a year later and look at your code, and your comment says one thing, but the code is doing something else, and it's very confusing. So don't let your comments contradict your code. Other words, keep the comments up to date. Comments should be complete sentences, and unlike when we're typing in Word, we want to use 2 spaces after the sentence ending period. So an example in the boxes, this would be a 1-line comment in Python, and then you see a paragraph. So this would be a multi-line comment in Python that spans several lines and describes your code. I hope that this makes sense to you. Note that I'm separating the paragraphs with a hash mark, which gives the eye an easy way to read the comments. Inline comments, use sparingly, and you should at least use 2 spaces from the statement.